So, question for the audience before we start, because while there's a bunch of thought that went into creating the content behind the next 45 minutes or so, it always ends up changing, as it gets delivered based on who's in the room and what's important to you, right? So, how many of you feel like the business has plateaued in some way? Right? How many of you would like to drive the growth at a faster rate? Yeah, right? So what I want to share with you over the next 45 minutes is, candidly, some best practices that I've been exposed to. I'm very fortunate in that I get to work with the Microsoft ecosystem all over the world. And what bubbles up out of that, I work with the MSP community, I work with the Dynamics community, I do some work with the global distributors as well, is there's certain patterns that are emerging that I believe can really accelerate, which is the key theme of this whole conference, the evolution of your cloud business. And I believe it's very realistic to double your business in a relatively short period of time. Right? So that's going to be our focus. Now, there's 5 areas that we're going to be talking about today. Right? The first one is around differentiation, psychological differentiation. The second thing is about how do you simplify what it is that you do in terms of the value you bring to your customers and your prospects. These are key themes that are going to drive acceleration. Right? How do you connect with your target audience at what I'm going to call a tribal level? Right, that develops trust. When you remove risk from a decision, it becomes easy. Right? So how do you remove the risk from doing business with your organization? The fourth area I want to focus on is around developing new cloud services. Right? You run a services-based business, that's where all the money is. Right? So what are these net new cloud services that you can bring to market that are going to differentiate you? And the last piece I want to talk about is how do you fundamentally change how you sell? Right? So I've been quite fortunate over the years. I've been working with Microsoft for about 10 of those, the last 10 years, working with this ecosystem. You may have seen some of my work in Cloud SureStep. So I developed the cloud sales methodology for partners globally for Microsoft. And I developed the cloud sales methodology for Microsoft for the Business Central community, for the AX or the F&O community. Right? And so as a result of that body of work, I get in front of partners about 120 days of the year. This is not theory. Right? I spend 120 to 130 days of my life per year in front of organizations like yours, which is where these patterns start to bubble up. So I always like to start these conversations with a discussion around what it is that's putting pressure on your business. So this is an exercise that I do with partners to crystallize candidly where the pressure is coming from. And you can see up here there's a number of categories that we go through. Now, I use this model to help partners determine where's the pressure points within the industries that they're going to sell into. Because you want to anchor your solution sets in something that's got an emotional kind of resonance with the business community. Right? So what you see behind me here is sort of an amalgamation of what I hear when I'm in front of your peers, but also when I'm in front of some of the multinational distributors. This is their perspective on your world. Right? So at a macroeconomic level, there's a fair bit of uncertainty in the world right now and instability. For those of you that work with other countries in terms of products or services, there's a lot of instability in terms of exchange rates. Like at a regulatory level, there are increasing pressures on organizations like ours to manage privacy. The vendors themselves, the Microsofts and the Ciscos and all of those communities, they're fundamentally changing their business models, changing margin structures, changing certification levels at a rate that they have never done in the past. right? For those of you that do work with distributors, they're giving you less than they have in the past, pushing you to self-service engines as a common theme. Your employees want to get paid more than they have in the past. There is a demand for skilled cloud resources, and so they've got some portability. We've got all kinds of new competitors coming into the market. Some are born in the cloud, don't have any of the legacy infrastructure costs that we have. We've got new entrants coming in that don't have to produce a profit, right? And then the customers themselves are radically different than they have been in the past, right? They're comparing online, they're educating themselves online, and then they're coming to you with what they think is their solution pre-configured. One of the biggest challenges that doctors have globally right now, it's resulting in fewer and fewer patient visits, is they've got people like us coming in telling them what our disease is. Anyone done that? Right? You do your own research. Oh my God, I have cancer. Better go see my doctor. No, Mark, you have a cold. Yeah, but look at all these, and so this self-diagnosis is going on, right? And all of those things are putting pressure on the key operating metrics that are driving our businesses, right? So I don't make this stuff up. This is what partners share with me. As a result of these pressures, the revenue is certainly under pressure, specifically for those that are moving from a traditional time and materials type model to a recurring revenue model. Administration costs are going up. Gross margins, unfortunately, are going down. Cost of goods sold is going down. That's good. But hey, customer churn is up. Can't differentiate. Got no working capital. And I got more risk than I ever have in the past. Woohoo! Right? My credit line, well, it's going up. My MDF is going down. Right? So there's all kinds of pressure on these key operating metrics. And the reason that I share this is I just want to kind of ground us in the realities of the world that we're living in today. Now, one of the most interesting exercises that I do, just going to go back one. Doesn't look like it's showing up. So I'll just walk you through it. I walk through an exercise with big distributors in multiple geos around the world, and one of the exercises, and this is with their leadership teams, and I walk them through an exercise around, well, what's the current state today? What's the profile of the majority of your customers? What do they look like? Like, where's the sweet spot, right? And what they share with me is, the partners have a horizontal focus for the most part. They very much serve a local geography. Their main offerings are resell, configuration support. Their customer acquisition modality is primarily referral. Right? They generally have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 clients. They'll add one and lose one on average per year. Bit reactive when it comes to managed services. So sell the service and react when there's a problem. Generally, less than about $100,000 in revenue or euros per employee. Less than 25% of the revenue is recurring. In terms of their specialization, they're technical generalists. Doesn't mean they're not good. They're very good at it, and very much a project orientation. Now, when I first did this exercise with some of these disties, I had no idea what it was going to come out of the exercise at all. Right? I was just trying to get clear on who's your customer base. But the next part was quite interesting because I said, well, if that's who your customer is today, well, what do they look like in 3 years? Because what I just described is what I call sort of the minimum viable partner, right? And there's a lot of you out there that fit into that categorization. And so I said, so what does the future look like 3 years from now? And when I do this exercise with partners, they come up with the same thing. So I think it's quite accurate. So my belief is, in 3 years, the minimum viable partner will have a specialization of some kind. Now, that could be industry, could be vertical, could be workload, could be a special, but there's going to be a deep specialization to differentiate. Right? My belief is that they will be geo-independent, meaning that you sell beyond the boundaries of how far you can drive in a day. What comes up out of those discussions is these partners have packaged offers. Right? So less of the reactive, tell me what you want and I'll sell it to you, and more of a, we're going to market with this packaged componentry. Customer acquisition will be inbound. Prospects will be finding you because of the work that you do. It won't be a 30 client average. It'll probably be closer to 50, minimum viable partner, and that generally will drive up the overall revenue. Right? The managed services that will be offered by this community will be more proactive. I call them optimization services. I'm going to talk about them in a little while. The average revenue contribution per employee will be higher. Right? Higher than $100,000 per employee. My belief is that the revenue on average will be about $3 million. Right? 75% of that will be recurring. Right? The capabilities that you bring to your customer base will be around cloud specialization, cloud optimization. Right? Less lift and shift and migrate and more value add. Right? And the core focus of the organization will be less on let's do a project and then manage it, and more around customer lifetime value optimization, adding more value, selling more to the existing customer base. Now, I don't know if 3 years from now that's actually realistically what happens, but I think it's an important thing to aspire towards. Right? So what I want to do is I want to share with you over the rest of the time that I have today what I see as best practices around the 5 core disciplines that will take an organization that looks like the minimum viable partner of today and turn it into the minimum viable partner of the future with as limited risk as we can. Because the other thing that's shifted out there, of course, is the customers. Right? All of this is always anchored in what is on the demand side. And I've been doing this for 30 years. I spent 20 years selling, small systems, big systems, technology solutions, software solutions, BI solutions. And what I know is that, in the old days, people would come looking for a solution set like this. Who is a photographer here? Knows a little bit about digital photography, right? So, and you know how to use a camera like that. Yeah, right? So there's still a community of buyers out there that are looking for those types of solution sets. How long does it take you with a solution like that to learn how to take a really good photo? It can take some time, right? But there's another community of buyers out there that are looking for something like this. I still want high quality, but I kind of want it right now. I want to be able to take those photos in an hour, and I'm not prepared to pay a lot for it. How many of you have a camera like this at home? Yeah, but what do we do today, right? Right, so not only do we have a lot of seismic shifts going on in the underlying industry itself, but you've got a pretty significant shift in demand. Now, has everybody gone over to the iPhone for their photos? No, right? So you're going to get a mixture in there of organizations that want something that's unique and special for them, and then there's going to be others that want something that's immediate that they can pay for, obviously on a subscription basis, and they want the freedom to disengage if they're unhappy with the service, right? So we got really 3 different buying types. Now, one of the most interesting bodies of work, oh, look, there it is. I'm going backwards. It's got the strangest sequence. Anyway, there's your minimum viable partner. I'm not entirely sure what's going to come next. Very bizarre. Anyway, I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about. So, you can't really see it, but it might catch up. But there's a body of work that I did for Microsoft over the last 3 or 4 years, where we looked at trying to put together an ideal profile of the most important metrics to kind of represent where the focus should be with MSPs. And there's 2 vectors or dimensions that you really want to think about. And this became the tool that Microsoft uses to manage its partners globally, its managed partners. Right? And so there's 2 dimensions that are critical to driving growth. The first, of course, is my ability to collect customers. Right? And there's 3 elements in there. One is, am I kind of in the cloud already? Do I have some momentum? The second thing is my ability to build some form of marketing capability. And the third, of course, is my ability to close transactions, right? So momentum, which will drive scale, and then marketing, and then sales. And then the other dimension is about focus, right? So how focused is my business? Do I bring any kind of productization to the market or packaging? And the third thing is how interesting or mature are the service offerings that I wrap around those things. So what I know in working with with really lots of partners is that we're generally a little bit weak in two core areas. One is in the marketing, and the second one is in the productization or the packaging. Would we agree? Not our core skill sets, right? So those are the two challenges, and we've heard lots of people today talk about those two components as being critical to driving growth. Right? What I'm delighted about sitting in the audience and listening to this here is I've met with most of the big distributors around the world, and some of them are regional, some are international, and they all talk about helping partners do this stuff. This is the only organization, I'm not saying this because I'm on the stage, this is the only organization I've met anywhere in the world that's doing it. That's actually doing it, helping partners market and helping partners package themselves and differentiate. Right? Those are the two hardest things that I know your community wrestles with. Right? So what I want to do is I want to talk about, well, let's see if it goes back. Right? So here's my belief. You got choices to make in terms of how quickly you want to drive that evolution. You know, at the bottom of this is business as usual. I'm just going to keep on doing whatever I'm doing. I think we've been able to get away with that, candidly, for the last couple of years, but I see the acceleration from the demand side really picking up. And so the choices then are, you know, how much do I want to step into the change initiative that Sharka talked about earlier? Right? So a lot of the MSPs that I work with are focused today on digital replacement, the lift and shift. Right? So I'm going to take something that was on-premise, I'm going to move it to the cloud. And there's lots of work around that. The next step or step of evolution after that is really around digital efficiency. So not only going to take you from here to here, and there's some economics and there's some math around why that may or may not make sense, but what I'm going to really do is help drive your business faster. And then at the top of this is you help an organization actually innovate on their business model. Right? So the closer you get to the top of that food chain, the more indispensable, the more irreplaceable you become. So let's talk about differentiation and specialization first. Just going to make sure it comes up. How many people here in the room feel pretty confident they got pretty good differentiation in terms of, you know, the message you bring to your customers? No, there's better. I've seen some of your websites. There should be more hands in the air. But I will tell you this. There are two types of differentiation. Right, our organization, Neural Impact, we know a lot about how the brain functions, and we apply that to how people collect customers at a global scale. Right? So there's a part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, that listens to logical differentiation. Right? And so when you have a good product, when you have a good price, when you're local, when you have great people that are certified in certain things, and all these things are all valuable, but the part of the brain that listens to that is your prefrontal cortex. Now, the part of the brain that is focused on your emotions listens to other stuff. So when you show up in an organization, first of all, how many people in the room have a cluster, right, like a large cluster of customers in a certain industry segment? Yeah. Right? Now, a bit of a rhetorical Canadian question. I'm from Vancouver. Is it easier to collect customers in that segment for you? Yeah, pretty darn easy, right? Now, a big part of that is psychological because when you show up, you're recognized as a member of the tribe. And as a byproduct of that, you're safe. We're going to get into that in just a few minutes. Safety is far more powerful as a motivator of human behavior than desire or greed. Right? So emotional differentiation happens at an industry level. It happens at a teaching level. When you teach somebody something new that they didn't know before they met with you, and that leads to something changed in their business, it's impossible to lose a deal. Simplicity is a critical emotional differentiator. The brain, right, 3% of your body mass, 24% of your body's energy. It's an inefficient organ. And so one of its key strategies to preserve energy, right, is to punish complexity and reward simplicity. I've seen the word simple come up here a dozen times today. I can't tell you how powerful that is in the decision-making process. Right? So when you think about differentiating yourself in your market, there's two different categories. One is logical, the other is emotional. Now, Having not worked really, I don't think, with anyone directly in this room, I can say with a great degree of confidence that every single one of your organizations has one of 3 win rates. Bold statement. You and your team, and I know a lot of you who are CEOs, owners of the business in the room, also chief sales officer, and chief collections officer sometimes too, right? So we're not talking about dozens and dozens of sales professionals here in large organizations, right? So you carry the load. As a sales professional, you will have a 20, 50, or an 80% win rate. Those are the only numbers that exist. When you normalize the point in a buying cycle where a decision is made, right? That in itself, in what I would say in Vancouver, is a 4-beer conversation, just in how you do that. But the reason I know this is because I have been whiteboarding partner sales processes for a decade. And I can tell you, if you're the salesperson and I'm going into how do you sell, I start out as a friendly Canadian, but after a while, it starts to feel a little uncomfortable because there's nowhere to hide. I have hundreds and hundreds of whiteboards of partner sales motions. There are only 3 win rates. Here's the fascinating thing about that. Anyone here really bothered by the chart? I do that on purpose just because it's kind of a lot of technical people, and they're like, that's not right. So what that represents, I've done this, and that represents, I'm telling you, a massive data set. That's the percentage of partners in the Microsoft ecosystem that drive those win rates. So roughly, which is where the data comes together, roughly 18% of Microsoft's global partner ecosystem drives an 80% win rate, roughly. Every single one of those companies, every single one, focuses on a single specialization. Not necessarily a single industry, a single specialization. Right? The 50% win rate, roughly 37% of the partner community globally, drives a 50% win rate when measured from what Microsoft would sort of look at as the end of the develop phase. And every single one of those companies has 3 or fewer specializations, every one. And of course, then what's left at the end is the 20% win rates who focus on everything under the sun. They do not have the discipline to say no. Right? Now, they also sometimes have clusters in certain industry segments, and they'll have a higher win rate there, but it's balanced out by an abysmal win rate when they pursue things where they have no expertise. Right? I could talk for hours about this, but then it would be dark, and no one would stay but me. But it's fascinating. 20, 50, or 80, every single one of you, and it has to do with focus. So the question becomes, well, how do you land on that focus? How do you land on that specialization? Right? And there's a couple of paths forward. You can land on a business process, right? Become sort of an expert in to me, candidly, I put security and compliance into this bucket. There are very, very specific business processes around security and compliance. Technology is just a piece of it, right? Or you go into the industry segment and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on a certain segment. There's one thing I hear more often in places like Canada is, Mark, I could never pick an industry. Oh, right, it's too limiting. Come to Denmark. It's 6 million people. Every partner in Denmark has an industry focus. They got through that hurdle 10 years ago. Right? So the fear of, if I pick 1 or 2 or 3, I'm going to say no to all the rest, is just it's a mental exercise that keeps you from winning more at a lower cost of sale. Here's another fascinating metric. On average, an 80% win rate sales professional, because you can have in one company a 20, 50, and an 80. But an 80% sales professional will basically consume 1/3 of the cost of sale resources of a 20%. An 80% win. Think about that. They consume 1/3 of the cost of sale resources. So if there is a demonstration of some kind that has to occur, it could be Business Central, Dynamics, CRM, or Office 365, a 20% win rate sales professional will make sure that everything is shown, and an 80% sales professional will show nothing, unless they have to. Right? Radically different cost of sale equation. So So what I'd like to do is walk you through some options for you, right? So how many of you thinking seriously about some kind of specialization in the cloud? Yeah, but unclear on exactly what that might look like. Now, you get a couple of options. One, Microsoft continues, and I don't want anyone to kind of read into this that I'm here to promote Microsoft. We work with partners of all sizes. We focus a lot on the Microsoft ecosystem. This is just one option, is take some of the capabilities that they're building increasingly into Office 365 that is encroaching, to be quite candid, on a lot of SMB business applications, right, like invoicing. Everyone knows there's an invoicing app in Office 365. I've yet to find a company out there yet that doesn't invoice. Right? So it's an easy foray into wrapping your arms a little bit more around the business community. Every small business organization uses some kind of free invoicing app, whether it's Wave or whether it's, there's dozens of them out there. But simply start with stuff like this. Right? Everybody aware that Microsoft Office 365 has a scheduling app. Right? There's so many small, medium-sized businesses that do this on pen and paper today that could, basically you're going in and saying, look, you already own it. Why don't we just activate it? We've got a little packaged offer around getting you up and running, and then we're going to help you optimize this scheduling on a monthly basis. Right? And maybe we're going to replace your phone system while we're at it. Right? So this is the easiest step into specialization, is just take what they already own and help people activate more of it. The next option that you've got, let me go back one, is around a solution assembly. How many people in the room here have some form of solution set available on AppSource? Anything? Yeah, there's some small, they don't have to be big things, right? But another strategy around building out solutions on top of what SureWeb brings to the table is just simply cobble together a number of other components, and you become the assembly machine, but you bring it to market in a certain segment. Right? The value you bring is the integration and the configuration. You don't have to build anything, you don't have to develop IP, none of that stuff. Right? Solution assembly. So, and the last option is, pick a particular solution set, an ISV capability, and go deep with it. And to me, for this community, the easiest place to go is with business intelligence and reporting. Right? So become an expert in extracting information from various subsystems. The SMB community, for the most part, is not an overly sophisticated user of technology. They don't have multiple databases of various versions and things like that. And their requirements for reporting are relatively simple. So to build packaged dashboard packages and then wrapping a managed service around that allows you to get in front of these folks on a regular basis, because their business requirements will always change. How many people here sort of sell to business owners today? There should be lots of hands in the air. Right? So let me tell you this, any business owner, yourself included, speak 3 languages. Language number 1, money. Right? Business owners speak money. They'd like to make more, they'd like to spend less. But when you're having a conversation about money, they're generally interested and they want to hear what you have to say. The second thing they're interested in, and this is where all the compliance money comes in, is risk. You met a business owner that wasn't interested in a risk conversation? Right? And fear and greed. How many people think that fear has a higher emotional resonance than greed? Yeah, most people, right? The ratio is actually 3 to 1. I'm not saying it's a good thing, it just is. It's measurable. Right? So risk, having a risk conversation or a compliance conversation or a threat detection conversation or a litigation conversation has 3 times the emotional resonance than a conversation about here's how we can help you make more money. Right? So they speak the language of money, they speak the language of risk, and this is the best part, the third language of business is control. Anyone here ever met a business person that's completely satisfied with all the business reporting they have? No, because they're control freaks. It's impossible to satisfy that thirst. Right? So think about packaging up your specialization around how do I help an organization make a little bit more, spend a little bit less, avoid compliance violations, lower their business risk, and give them more control. And that's where ISV solution sets can come in to give you a specialization around things like reporting. So the next thing I want to talk about is this thing again, keeps coming back. Don't know why. but here we are. We're going to talk about simplification. So I talked about the brain. I talked about the brain rewarding simplicity and punishing complexity. Has anyone here in the room ever really, really, really read a Microsoft license agreement? Come on, don't. Just hide that. Yeah. Right, so they designed the stuff with 2-point font, 46 pages. The brain looks at that, super confused. What does it do? It defaults to, I agree. And when they come 5 years from now and they collect your firstborn, you're like, what? Well, you agreed to it. It's in the end user license agreement. Right? So that's just a strategy. It's not unconscious strategy, but it's a way of kind of tapping into the brain rewards simplicity. If you make your solutions simple, easy to understand, it will be rewarded. Right? So some examples of organizations that have done this really well. This is the solution set. They built it on in the back end, but content and code, these are 2 landing pages from their website. One, helping to increase productivity and efficiency in retail and hospitality, specifically for Office 365. Now, do you think a retailer really uses Office 365 all that different than a professional services firm? No. There's some nuance to it, for sure. That's why they can add a little bit of IT consulting support. They got another landing page, right? Building the foundations of digital transformation in construction and engineering with Office 365. Now, if you're an engineering and a construction firm and you find these folks and then 3 other managed service providers that do, Office 365 implementations and managed services, which one are you going to go to? It's going to be one of these, right? It's tribal. Tourism in the cloud. Small 5-person MSP out of Australia. Right? They get a lot of airplay with Microsoft now because they inherited or they closed a deal with a small amusement park. And the amusement park wanted a whole bunch of reporting, and they wanted information out of the point-of-sale systems and the food systems. And then when they were all done, they kind of felt like they had a tourism solution. So they went and tried to sell it to other amusement parks, which apparently there are lots of in Australia. And now they got an industry vertical. People buy it from them from all over the world, but it's really just Office 365, Power BI, and a little bit of integration. But if you're an amusement park, this is simple stuff to buy. Right? Company I work with in Australia called HubOne. Right? So they use SharePoint, Office 365 to build a solution set. Their focus is just exclusively on accountants. That's their specialization. Right? So if you're an accountant looking for a provider and you land on these folks in Australia, they support the whole continent remotely. It's easy. They're growing like this. Right? So specialization is around the industry itself. Cobweb is a partner that is out of the UK. These are all partners of your size for the most part. Right? And they focus in on SMB. Right? So they packaged up something Cobweb Complete for SMB. Someone's right, and then they step in. Oh, wonder what they do for me. Oh, now you're into the conversation. They got great conversion tools, right? Now we've had a number of people today talk about recurring revenue, right? So we all know now that we can go out and we could subscribe to a vehicle. You've all seen these sort of advertisements and examples. Cadillac as a service, pay a flat monthly fee. You can change your Cadillac in and out as many times as you want throughout the year and order it on an app. I do a lot of work in Europe. In Finland, you have mobility as a service. So you just pay 1 monthly fee. You get trains and you get buses and you get taxis. Right? It's just right. So what can we do? You got a partner here, Your IT, firewall as a service. I love it. Now I'd rebrand it, make it a little bit more sexy in terms of the language itself. But there's nothing that you offer today that people will not pay for as a service. Right? I did a gob of work years ago when Microsoft originally launched Office 365. So I was part of training the sales team that fielded all of those, candidly, their leads, but people who had requested a 30-day trial, and built the tools to get them to connect to partners to implement and migrate. So what I learned through that body of work is that the hardest cloud application to buy is the first one. Anyone experience that? The hardest cloud application to buy is the first one. But once you fall and you Office 365, CRM Online, Dropbox, any of these, the rest go quite quickly, right? So there's a huge opportunity to upsell, cross-sell if you've got a customer that's already gone to the cloud. Right? Second thing I want to talk about here is tribal. Right? So the days of one size fits all are over. Right? So if you go back to the 20-50-80, I can almost tell a company's win rate by the content that I consume on their website. Right? And the reason that it's so critical is because of your psychology. Anyone know the significance of 151? It's a magic number. I've had a couple of pretty smart people. It's a prime number, Mark, you idiot. Now I know it's a prime number. It's the maximum number of relationships that you can manage in your brain. Finite. Right? I mean, every military on the planet designs and organizes all of their soldiers around this number. IBM built its entire workforce strategy globally around 151. It's the maximum number of relationships you can manage. And the thinking from the social psychology side is that if you're comfortable with the concept of evolution, our brains grew to manage the number of relationships that were required in the tribes that we lived in for thousands and thousands of years, however long you feel we've been on the planet. Right? And so what we know is that tribal equals safety. Anyone here been to a conference in another country? Find themselves gravitating towards people from Canada or the US? Yeah, so the further we are from home, the more the tribe becomes important to us. Happens everywhere we go, right? So industry is a tribe. IT is a tribe, right? So there's a couple of different ways you can get tribal. I'll give you some examples. Here's a managed service provider focused on dental. Do you think dentists use Office 365 much differently than anybody else? No, right? But if you find these folks, they got HIPAA compliance, IT support for dental offices, well, that's pretty complicated, right? And then you got Office 365. Now, that doesn't really look like a dentist to me, so I would probably change the picture, right? But you're 30 days away from being industry focused. I can tell you that right now, right? The first step is just let's tell the world that we're good at servicing certain communities, and you will attract them. Right? Lawware is a Microsoft partner, Office 365 SharePoint partner out of London. Right? Practice management software for law firms. Nothing in there about Office 365. Right? Does that look like a lawyer? Sure. Most lawyers. Right? Look at this. Office 365 for the construction industry, only in Quebec. Right? But there's a lot of construction that goes on here, right? You guys are laughing at me, right? So you're in the construction or the building industry, you're looking for a new managed service provider because you've had a bad incident or your business is growing. Oh, look at this. Got a beautiful image of someone in a little safety vest, all the mobility, collaboration, and agility your business needs. Oh, I'm in. I'm going to click on that long before I'm going to click on a generic partner. Right? It's another example of tribal. Right? So here's an organization, Cloud IT, construction and engineering. And what I like about this is you double-click on some of the content, and they're very, very specific about how Office 365 solves construction and engineering challenges. Right? Now, when you get them on the phone, do you think they have the vernacular and the language to support that? Probably do. Yeah. But this is tribal. Right? Another way to engage is at the persona level. Right? So I want to kind of walk you through different ways of engaging people in a very short period of time. Right? So one is, look, are you an internet manager, a CIO, or a comms director, SharePoint partner? We do intranet sites. Oh, they understand me. I'm the technical guy. These people are crazy. Or I'm the comms director. Oh, and you can have similar content behind each of those, but they're going to feel somewhat special. Right? This is the Lawware folks in the UK. Again, these are your peers. And what they do, they've gone quite deep and said, here's the different roles within law firms. Click on the one that resonates with you. Right? This is an MSP that said, you know what? We sell to two communities, technical and business. I love this. Right? It's because it's our language. It's buying language. IT is my day job. IT is not my day job. Okay? And they got 2 different data sets underneath there. Great way to get personal. Now, look at these words here. Do any of these words show up on any of your websites? Any of your marketing collateral? Yeah, that's too bad because they're dead. Yeah, so these are words that are so overused by so many industries to describe so many things that the human brain no longer knows what they mean. I mean, we have certain inferences in the tech industry in terms of what we think people understand, but you get real estate companies and plumbing companies, everybody uses these things, and so what the brain has done is shut this off. So whenever we see this thing here, any one of these words, we disengage. If the word doesn't produce a picture, you can't stimulate an emotion. Right? So one way of engaging is using that tribal language. Here's some examples of emotional content. It's a piece I wrote for BDO, 7 software selection mistakes that spell failure. You take the BDO part out of there, it's applicable to any business size. That became their single biggest lead source for projects the year that we wrote that for them. Right? What emotion does that appeal to? It's risk. Right? Anyone on the front end of a project, big, small, or medium, is going to be kind of interested in that, and they'll trade their name for it. Right? Here's another one. Hi, I'm calling you from Microsoft Windows Tech Support. It's a fantastic campaign from an MSP out of the UK in the middle of that whole period where people were getting calls and having to hand over their credit cards. Right? This is one of my favorites. It's an LSP out of Europe. Hey, how would your enterprise manage a $20 million fine? What emotion do you think they're tapping into there? Hey, a little bit of fear, risk, compliance. And the thing I loved about it is their little clock was moving as you were sitting on their website. Right? This is all about GDPR compliance as the clock ticked down to May. How many people use pretty good visuals on your website? Right? This is a way of tapping into the emotions, and contrasts are some of the strongest things that you can use. Right? Now, you got 2 options for the cloud. One is public, one is private. Which one do you want? Well, I know the right one is the public one, right? But you look at that and you say, oh, look at that. Did you know that the average public swimming pool contains, on average, about 18 gallons of urine? Just a little factoid, right? So you're thinking, oh, I don't want to be in that pool in the south of Spain with the Brits that are in there all day long drinking beer and they never get out. I want the private cloud. Right, so it's a brilliant use of visuals. Don't underestimate the impact of visuals. The more you know about your tribe, the easier it is to create the visuals. So whether that tribe is an industry or a vertical or a workload or a specialization, align the images that you have on the website with it. It'll accelerate your customer acquisition. Now, Microsoft produced both of these assets. Which one would you consume? Please don't say this. I've had this slide for 5 years. I've never read it. I don't even know what it says. Right? So this is a way, so use images, use visuals. The brain rewards simplicity, punishes complexity. It's one of my favorite campaigns that Microsoft put together. This is about as bad as it gets. Anyone here do nurture marketing of any kind? Right? Yeah, look at this. Hey, imagine you're a small business owner and this lands in your inbox. Hey, what if your company had access to biz apps and communication tools virtually anytime, anywhere? What the hell? What does that mean? I mean, I'm in the industry. I don't even know what that means. Hey, thousands of small businesses have told us they're thrilled about the productivity gains. No, they didn't. There's not people phoning Microsoft telling them how thrilled they are. What the heck? Oh, but it gets better. 3 advantages that our customers are apparently so excited about that they're just melting the phones in Redmond. Flexible subscription plans. Ooh, that's a winner. Easy access to business apps and documents. What? I run a trucking company. What the hell is that? And number 3, one-click software management. Oh, and look at this. I got this lovely image. Got some creepy dude. Got a hipster, unemployed, walking around with his Game Boy. Got the weird predator dude hiding in the park. Lazy girl sleeping there. Got a dead tree and fences. Anyway, that description that I just rolled out, I did that to Microsoft's U.S. Office 365 partner marketing team, and one guy at the back goes, yeah, that one was mine. How'd that do? Not so good. right? So just an example of what not to do along with what we can do. Hey, so if any of you kind of looking at this stuff thinking, geez, my website could use some work, we're not going to sell you anything. But go to our website, do this little mini audit. It walks you through the 9 emotional components of online engagement. It talks about tribal, all kinds of stuff like that. All these slides are available to you as well. And we're not going to sell you anything. We're not going to call you. But you're going to kind of feel bad when you're done. But we'll send you about a 10-page report, and it'll tell you how to fix it all. We don't do the work. We just tell you what's wrong. I'd recommend you do it. So I'm out of time, but what I want to do is I want to kind of walk through 2 things quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. I'll probably take about 5 minutes, if that's okay with you guys at the back. All right. Services is the lifeblood of everyone's business in here, right? So what I want to do is I want to walk you through a model that I want you to consider, right? We have a tendency to look at our services projects through the lens of our business and our profitability. But if you actually look at projects through the customer's lens, there's basically 3 phases: big, small, or medium projects. Like, I have a business problem back here. I'm going to spend some time consulting with various vendors, and I'm going to make a decision. Then they're going to implement this stuff, migrate it, lift it, shift it, move it, and then I'm going to use it when we're all done. Fair? Right? So there's a couple of key points in here: the selection and then the go live. Now, the partner's best day in this customer life cycle generally going to fall somewhere over here. You agree? Implemented the project, we're all done, issued the last invoice around project services, moved into the managed services, dodged a bullet, all is good. That's our best day. Would you agree? What's the customer's worst day? Oh, look, same day. They spent all their money. They've done whatever project they needed to do. All the smart people have left the building, and they're now on reactive support. So one of the most fundamental challenges we have with moving to the cloud is in an on-premise world, they bought what they bought, they own it, they're not going to go anywhere. In the cloud, they have portability. So I believe this has a significant impact on the types of services that we build, to be candid. Right? We want to make the customer's best day the partner's best day. Your best day. Right? Now, to do that, you have to consider building out 3 sets of services. Think about building out 3 sets of services. The first, this is a packaged offer on the front end that helps organizations define what it is that they need to implement and what the business case is if they need one. This is true of small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large businesses. The more you know about an industry or specialization, the easier it is to go in and do these things up front. Right? The second thing we need to do is, of course, we need to still do our project services, but we need to do them in a faster way. Right? And SureWeb talked earlier today about all kinds of tools they're bringing to the table to help accelerate the implementation of this, take some of the cost out. And then the third thing, which to me is the most important, is we need to start to come up with new services. Optimization services. So a managed service is, I sell you an insurance policy, and I hope you don't call. I hope we do such a good job on this that you never have a problem, and I get to keep all the money. Now, you may be investing in the back end and the efficiencies and operational improvements and things like that, but at the end of the day, that's the managed service business model. Right? But it's reactive. Optimization services are managed services that you sell where you continue to go back in and you work with this client and they pay you for it, but it's focused on delivering greater business value out of what they have purchased. And companies will pay for this. They will pay for this. Right? So, a couple of things to consider. One, around acceleration services. If there's things that you're doing over and over and over and over and over again from a project services perspective, automate them. Charge the same if you want, right? But make it more efficient. That part we understand. And my belief is, in working with partners, that once you get quite clear on helping organizations define their business case and the priorities behind this stuff, well, when you get to the optimization services, that's where you can start to measure whether they actually get that value or not, and it will lead to upsell, cross-sell opportunities, and lots of them. Now, that is hard to do if you're pursuing multiple industries, right? And then what happens is you start to be able to collect enough data and information from these organizations, if they're in a cluster, and you become a bit of an expert on what good, better, and best looks like from a benchmarking perspective. I work with a lot of partners in a lot of corners of the world kind of implementing this sort of stuff here. All I do is work them with the model, they come up with the stuff, and we're starting to see some fantastic examples. They'll all be in the PowerPoint slides, they're all yours, around selection services that organizations have developed around the MSP space that prospects pay for early in the sales cycle to help them get clear on picking the right thing. And the same is true in the optimization services on the back end. These are the harder ones to wrap around because in a typical managed services business model, you have less expensive resources delivering reactive support. Doesn't mean they're not skilled, but to deliver optimization services, it's more proactive. And so what happens is you're probably going to have a higher skilled resource do that body of work, but it's a higher margin managed service at the end of the day, right? So I want to end it there because of the time. I'll leave you with this. And the reason I'm stopping at the last piece we had to talk about, candidly, was the sales process, and I covered that off in the 20-50-80. But I will tell you this: there are 3 sales motions in the cloud. Most people in this room have been trained on one, which is solution selling, right? So depending upon the packaged offer that you bring to market, you will either bring a solution set that is repeatable, that is simple, that is sold over the phone with no geographical boundaries, and it's kind of a 3-step sales process. Or you bring something that has a little bit greater complexity to it, right? Where you're probably going to physically have to go on site because the dollar value is higher, or there's a higher risk profile to the project. And then there's the third motion, which is the more traditional, lots of moving parts, lots of risk, probably going to go on site a couple of times, but the dollar value is greater, right? So what I would encourage you to do is you start to think about packaging up things in a more industry or specialized way. What that allows you to do is significantly reduce the sales cycle itself. And so I want to share one statistic with you, and then we'll leave it. And it's right here. Microsoft invited me in to work with the Office 365 sales team when they launched Office 365 with the trial. What I didn't know at the time was that there were significant conversion problems. Right? So there were roughly 100,000 people per month that were registering for a trial. 8,000 of those, roughly, would turn into SMB. And the conversion rate in terms of commuting those into conversations with partners was pretty low. We implemented, and I'll make sure that this is available through SureWeb, simple email and voicemail communication string. And within 6 weeks, we had moved it up to a 45% conversion rate. So the more focused you are in your specialization, the more of these types of tools you can actually implement to streamline the sales process itself. So thanks for your time. Hope you found something useful in that conversation that we just had. If you have any other questions after the fact, I'll be here to the end of the day.